Hello again, as usual, I am Blunty, and welcome to part 2 of my review of Olympus's new pro-level picture taker, the OMD EM-1. Now, last time I took you on a tour of the hardware, which, if you missed it, spoiler alert, is all kinds of nifty. This time I get to show you what happens when you use the hardware, my favourite part of any camera review really. Now, about that new sensor and processor combo, let's start with how sensitive it is. Now, low light sensitivity hasn't historically been Olympus's strongest suit. I mean, their latest stuff has been pretty damn decent, but they don't exactly lead the pack if we're honest with ourselves. The story gets a bit better with the EM-1 though. I didn't have the chance to take it shot for shot up against the EM-5 or the EP5, but anecdotally, it seems to be at least a stop and a bit better again. Things stay very well controlled until about ISO 1250, where the noise reduction starts creeping in on the detail, and by ISO 6400 you're past where you'd want to print from really, but it's still more than good enough for online, I think. After that, it's your call on how much noise you're willing to accept. I will note at this point that I only had access to the JPEGs because I was working with a pre-release camera, and the RAW files, well, they didn't open in Aperture at all because it was a secret while I was using it, so obviously there was no support in the software. Anyway. But generally speaking, in these pre-dawn, heavily overcast low-light conditions, even when I let the camera decide what ISO it wants, things are actually very pleasant. Detail is well retained, and colours are very well rendered and natural, and it handles itself very gracefully indeed, I found. And considering that the Micro Four Thirds system has some truly superb fast glass out there for it, you'll actually rarely need those higher ISOs when noise starts to creep in anyway. And existing Ollie shooters will be very relieved to know that the new sensor and processing engine retain all of that wonderfully rendered colour that Olympus shooters love about being Ollie shooters. Colour is liquid and very tonal, while fine detail and sharpness are maintained very well, and the tweaked up focusing system is, well, it's crazy fast. Olympus say it's even faster than the EP5s, but that was already kind of nutty quick, so it's probably hard to tell without some lab equipment whether it is or isn't faster still. But all that really matters is it is fast, accurate, and you can rely on it. And as we talked about in the hardware review, the marvellous and industry-leading 5-axis image stabilisation is on board too, of course. I'll show you the friggin' magical job it does on video in just a minute, but as you're seeing here, it's friggin' amazeballs when it comes to shooting slow shutter stuff handheld too. These were all done handheld, from a standing position with no other support at all, and I got all the way to 1.3 seconds exposure time without any shake-induced blur. And that's not just a nifty party trick, that's real-world useful stuff. It can make a massive difference in your photos, and all without having to remember a tripod or, indeed, lug one around all day. It's also useful for using those new HDR bracketing modes I talked about in the hardware review. But this time I can show you the results. Again, these are shot handheld from a standing position, either 5 or 7 frame exposure bracketing, and they're all able to be aligned perfectly with absolute minimal effort or cropping needed. But my very favourite new trick is the Color Creator wheel dial thingamabobby, and it lets you very quickly and intuitively punch up saturation or indeed progressively desaturate a scene and shift the color cast around at will. And this is a wildly powerful creative tool, but I love it most for what it lets me do with black and white images. See, if you fully desaturate the image and then move the hue control around, it directly affects how the black and white image is processed. It's exactly like the old school trick of using colored filters with black and white film, but you get to see and fine-tune the results before you even press the shutter. And it's this kind of control that can let you get some of the loveliest straight out of the camera black and white images that I've ever seen. Those street shooters out there who like to work in black and white, you're gonna love this. And the news keeps getting better because it works perfectly in video too. In fact, I think I love it even more in motion. Now, Panasonic's new GX7 is the only other camera I'd say comes even close to producing black and white stills or video that's this nice straight out of camera. But the GX7 doesn't have the gobsmacking image stabilization that this beastie does, and it doesn't have that hue control either. And I don't know about you, but this kind of look makes me wish I was a pretentious indie filmmaker so I could justify using black and white more often, because I'm in love. And throughout many of these shots you've also been seeing the tweaked up full-time tracking autofocus in action too, and while it occasionally and very briefly second guesses itself, for the most part it does a terrific job at locking onto moving objects and smoothly tracking them throughout the scene. Oh, and as promised earlier, here's the difference that stabilization system makes. Told you it was the best in the industry. There's no tricks here, no fake out, just me, one-handed, at a regular walking pace, on a flat surface, and in the dark no less. And look at it. Now, to be fair, Olympus still aren't going to be the leader in video from Micro Four Thirds cameras. They still only have a middle ground bitrate and no option except for 30p 1080 video, but this is undoubtedly, unquestionably their best video shooter yet. That new sensor without the AA filter brings in tons of detail, and the new processing engine keeps aliasing and Morier artifacting extremely well suppressed. And while the frame rate limitations may not make it the ideal choice for some types of pro shooters, 30p is what YouTube does natively, and that stabilization is second to nobody, so for other kinds of pros, and for shooters like me, it is a very real choice for shooting video on. So to wind up, in general, in stills or video, you get that lovely punchy colour, great detail, minimal or completely suppressed artifacts of any kind, and big, fat piles of immediate and powerful creative control. The OMD EM-1, gentle people of the audience, is a thrilling, awesome camera. The OMD EM-5 was already attracting a lot of professionals and heavy enthusiasts over from the traditional DSLR side of the fence, and this beastie will undoubtedly be the trigger point for many more who are fence sitting. But that's me done. Thanks for watching. I am Blunty, and I will catch you next time.